Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach. Yoim Shoim Parshas Pekudei. Shnas Toshin Ayin Vav. Yeshiva Tiferes Avigdor. Eile Pekudei HaMishkan. Pekudei is a term of counting, of inventory, taking account of everything. In this Parsha, Rashi says, all the donations to the Mishkan, how much kesef, how much zov, the choishes, the kalim. The pasuk says, "Eile pekudei hamishkan, mishkan ha'edus." So Rashi wants to know from the Chazal, why is it called Mishkan ha'edus? Well, Parsha, you might say, because it contained the Aron, and the Aron, Torah is called the Edus. Edus Hashem Nemona Machkimas Pesi. Rashi says, no. Edus Yisroel Sheviter Lohem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Al Ma'aseh. This is a remez, it's an edus, Klal Yisrael, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was mevater Lohem on the Ma'aseh Egel Shaharei Hishre Shchinosei Beinehem. He was Mashre his Shchina Beinehem. Now, what this Rashi is telling us is that the Mishkan represented a testimony, and that became the Ikar Shem of Mishkan Ha'edus. It's not a Zayti Gezach. It's called the Mishkan Ha'edus because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mevater Klal Yisroel, because they were Ma'aseh the Egel. Now we know that anybody who says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mevater on something is, Hashem said he's going to be very punished. Hashem says there's no such a thing as vitur by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem is not mevater on anything. For every single thing, Al kol ne'elam Yovei b'mishpat. There's no such a concept of HaKadosh Baruch Hu letting things go. The concept of vitur is, you know what? I'm a vater, I'm going to overlook it. I'm going to let it go. So, the first question is what is the pshat that HaKadosh Baruch Hu here was mevater? Sheviter lehem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Al Ma'aseh Ha'egel. That's number one. Number two, we have to understand is l'chayra, Klal Yisrael did tshuva. They did tshuva. Usually, vitur is associated with somebody who says, "You know what? Forget about it. I'm going to give you this. You wronged me. I'm going to be mevater. I'm going to overlook it, and I'm not going to hold you accountable." That Kodesh Baruch Hu here wasn't such a thing. There definitely was tshuva here. Now the emes is, the Chafetz Chaim says in a number of places that every one of us knows that we have a cheshbon hagodol ve'hanoira with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Midas HaRachamim is such that when he gives a person oinshin, it appears as if you're getting away scot-free. I mean, there's a concept called Tumura. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a person could be chayiv misa, let's say, for example. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes him an ani, and the anius is considered a chayiv misa. Hashem makes him a mitzayra, and a mitzayra is chashem kimeis. Well, Hashem makes him other things, it's considered like he's a mace. Now, the Ma'aseh HaEgel was a tremendous chet. It kindled the wrath, the charoin af of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it took Moshe many days. He had to go up to the Har Sinai again for 40 days, and again for 40 days. And if you look at the Psukim, you see the stages of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu became more accepting and favored Klal Yisroel more and more. Initially, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, this is going to change us, our relationship forever and forever. And it's never going to be the same. I'm not going to be mashgiach on you. I'm going to send a malach lefonecha, and that malach will now guide you. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe Rabbeinu davened to Hashem, no, we want to have it personal, we want to go back to where it was. And eventually HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Solachti kidvorecha. So the Mishkan, and Hashem was Pashat came to be Mashra his Shechina Beinenu. And that is a tremendous chesed from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what we call vitur. Somebody, let's say, wronged you, and then he said he's sorry. He said, okay, I'm going you, but, you know, the guy did damage that's going to be for Neitzach Nitzachim. It's very hard for you to get back to this person. That's called a vitur. For the Chet Egel, even though it says b'yoyim pakidi upakaditi, that there's no peronias in the history of Klal Yisroel where they got punished, that there wasn't a shtickle for the Chet Egel, but still in all, there's a Mishkan Ha'edis that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to know that he was mevater on the Chet Egel because he was mashra his Shechina B'nei. If you take a look in the Vilna Goyen in Shir HaShirim, on the Pasuk, it says, Hinecha Yofe Doidi, Af Noim, Af Arseinu Ra'anona. The Pasuk describes 3 steps of his karvus of the Am Yisrael to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. First, we say Hinecha Yofe Doidi. Second, we say Af Noim. And number 3, we say Af Arseinu Ra'anona. So the Vilna Goyen explains what are these 3 stages. He says, in the daily tefillah, we say Ahav Rabba Ahav Tonu. Hashem Elokeinu. Then it says, Chemla Gidoyla Viseira Chamalta Olei. What is the 2 stages? So the Vilna Goyen says, initially, Bimei Ha'avos, and when HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim, and when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the Torah, it was Ahavoscha Rabba Aleinu, the Ava to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to Klal Yisrael was mamish tremendous. It was Ahav Rabba Ahav Tonu Hashem Elokeinu. That's the first step. Then, when they did the Egel, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I'm going to destroy them in a second. Still in all, there was a big charoin af against Klal Yisrael. Still in all, chamaltoli, and you were moichelos. Chemla, the Vilna Gaon says, is something you have after you get angry. Anger that's overlooked is followed by chemla. Now, it's interesting, it says, Chemla gidoyla viseira chamalta olein. It was gidoyla viseira. What does that mean? That means that the chemla that Hashem did for us was greater than it was initially. You know why? Because you gave us the luchas shniyos. The ava of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was more than the ava that he had earlier, and Hashem was mitzavos to make the Mishkan so that he could be mashur the Shechina b'nei. That was something we didn't have earlier to that. So the Vilna Gaon is explaining, according to the Shita of the Rishonim, that say that Tzivoy of the Mishkan was Nischadesh after the Chet Egel. So now the Vilna Gaon explains the pasuk. He says, we say, Hinachayof Edoidi. That means, B'tchila, before the Maisa Egel, when you took us out of Mitzrayim, and you were Mekarav to Har Sinai, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Hinachayof Edoidi. Then, there was Af Noyim. That refers to, even though I made the Egel, we say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you were Noyim, you were pleasant, you were sweet to us, you were Meichel us, and you were Mashpia us, Rav Tuv. And you gave us the Luchas Shniyos. And the third step was Af Arseinu Ranona. That means to say you were Moisif to us, and Asiyas HaMishkan, and like it says, V'asuli Mishkan V'shachanti B'soicham. That means B'soich B'nei Yisroel. So that means to say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Shoyreh in the level of Kol Yisrael. So when we say this in the morning, before we makabel upon ourselves, El Malchus Shemayim. You see, now this is Shaloi Kederech HaTeva, because initially when HaKadosh Baruch Hu loved us, the schus of our avos, where he said, Zocharti lo chesed nurayich, ahavas keluloi sayich, Hashem said, Lech teich acharei b'midbar, he went with great amunah and great dedication. So that we understand is what a person expects in the Ava Rabba Avtonu Hashem Elokeinu. But to expect that after you fell and Hashem got so angry, to expect a chemlo gidoylo v'seiro chamalto leinu, that's something that Shaloi Kederech HaTeva. And that is what we're saying is the Mishkan HaEdus. It's an Edus, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to have an Edus. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Viter Lem, was Meichel Lem on this great Chet of the Egel, Shari Hishresh Chinosei Aleim. Now, what we have to take out from this is that you have to know that throughout our lives, we're going to experience a lot of yeridos. People are going to do sometimes terrible things. Sometimes people fall into, they walk through the gates of Tumah, and they down the steps and they descend into the depths and become shakua bechet. And what the Yetzer Hara tells a person in that situation is that a friend, you ticked Hashem off. You angered Hashem. I remember a fellow who, Nebuch, was a yeshiva bacher, and he came from a very good family, and he chose to go in the wrong path. And he smoked on Shabbos, he ate on Yom Kippur, he ate chametz on Pesach. God was a nice kid, but for some reason the Yisroel got a hold of him, and he was understandably convinced that he blew it. Here a person does so many chatoyim and such drastic merida, and the person wasn't somebody that came from a non-frum home. It was somebody that was aware. People do terrible things. But you have to know. So I was sitting and talking to him, and I said to him, you got to understand one thing. I said, who do you think arranged for this meeting between me and you? You think I arranged this? This meeting was arranged by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu way of saying to you, you know what? There's still hope. I told him that the Yidden ticked Hashem off for the first time after Matan Torah. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu, let go of me. Get away from me and let go. So Rashi says, let go. Was Moshe Rabbeinu holding on to Hashem? He wasn't letting him go? What does it mean he wasn't letting him go? So Rashi says, no, the pshat is, Hashem was letting Moshe Rabbeinu know that if you don't let go of me, there's hope. If you get swallowed up into the greatness of this chet, and you start to feel that it's overwhelming and hopeless, don't let go. You should know, if you bug me, you'll be able to come back. Do you know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said? Even though he said to Moshe Rabbeinu, "V'achala oisam kereg hanichali," he said, "Leave me alone." Hanichali. That's what he told him. Moshe told him. Hanichali. V'achala oisam kerega. And Moshe Rabbeinu understood from that Hashem was giving him a Pesach and telling him that if you're not maniachli, then you're going to be able to make it back. So from that we have to learn a tremendous lesson. It took me a long time to convince this person. I said, of course there's a price you're going to have to pay for every chet that you did. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu could do it the same way as the Egel said. That when you will have to go through, experience Puranios, Hashem will give you a little bit from the Chafiyah Chatoyim also. Hashem can be Meroik, B'rachamecha HaRav. Hashem has many ways that He has available for us to be Meroik, to be Mechaper, and to clean the slate between Himself and between us. And this is what a person has to know. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to know that a person should never give up on himself. In the davening we say, Slach lonu avinu ki choton. We say this 3 times a day. Mechal lonu malkeinu ki foshonu. Ki moichel v'solech oto. And then it says, concludes, Baruch ato Hashem chanun hamarbel l'sleich. Now this is a very important message. Here a person asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he said, came to Hashem for Shachris. And he said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I makir your Avinu. I first said Hashivenu Avinu. And then I said Slach Lonu Avinu. And now I'm here again for Mincha. And then I'm going to come back for Ma'ariv. So the Chazal concluded that Chanun Hamar B'Lisleich. Hashem has a midah of Rav L'Sleich. No Rav is back on Shbuch Marbe, no limit, no end. There's no end to the Marbe L'Sleich. A person has to know that it's possible for a person. Now, there is such a klal that sometimes the Rambam says hadin noisin, that a person can't do tshuva. There is. So what happens to that person? He gets stuck somewhere in Portland, Oregon. He gets stuck somewhere in Iowa. He gets stuck somewhere in Yehupitzville, and he gets lost among the nations of the world. That's not the worst thing to happen to the person. But Kol Zman, a person has still some connection, and somebody is talking to him and attempting to awaken you, and you give up on yourself, then you threw in the towel. You have to know, Baruch Hashem, most of us didn't do chatoyim like the Chetei. We didn't do chatoyim that angered Hashem that much, hopefully not, that really Hashem felt like v'achala oisam kirogim. But that person has to tell himself that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm a roitze, I want to get some of the chemla, gedoyla, viseira, that chamalto aleinu. And I know that if I'm a bola taher, I'm going to come back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You see this sometimes, people who are big Rishayim, they did tshuva. They did tshuva. The famous Maisa, the Kelem Magid. He once came to a city, and he asked, when he came to the city, what needs to be mesukim? He started to ask about how's the learning, the Chavras Mishnayos, the Chavras Gemaras, how's the Bikur Cholim, how's the Gemil Chasadim. I told him everything in this city is Baruch Hashem fine. He said, what's the problem? There's one problem. There's a guy who's a Meiser. We have a Shtot Meiser. And this Meiser is somebody who Pashat gave sorrows to so many people. He caused tsar, v'yagoin, v'anochat. He was Meiser to the government. They took people's nechasim away. They broke up family, they threw people in jail. And people see this guy coming, they Pashat to have pachad mavs. And the guy looks up and he says to them, "Come back in. The guy is coming right now. That's his wagon coming down the road, and I'm getting out of here because I will not do it." So the Kelem Magid stays in the middle of the road. The guy pulls up his wagon, and Kelem Magid goes over to him. He says, "Shalom Aleichem." He says, "No, I am. I'm the Kelem Magid." Introduce himself. So what's your name? He tells him, he asks him his name. He starts to schmooze. The Kelem Magid says to him, I heard that you're a person, a man of your words. When you give your words, you follow through with it 100%. You don't change your mind. You're not a flip-flop kind of guy. He meant to say, the Brog, he threatens the guy, he's going to take care of a guy, he never changes his mind. He said, I want to ask you one favor. Please, I'm asking you one favor. You have to tell me it's not going to cost you anything. I'm going to ask you a favor. You know what I had? I'm the Shtatz Moshe, people are not doing it. They call me the Rosh of the Rosh. I said, I'll pick it. Do me a favor. I said, what do you want? He said, in a couple hours, I'm going to say a Rosh. I'm going to speak in the shul. I'm asking you to please come to the Rosh. The guy said, I haven't walked into a shul in the longest time. I had no shaykhs. He said, do me one thing. It's not for davening. It's not for learning. I'm saying the Rosh, and I'm asking you to please come to the Rosh. shook his hands. Remember, you're a man of your word. That's the one thing I heard about you. You're a man. You're to a house. Look, you keep your word. Nope. Came time for Kel Maggid to speak in the shul. He was a very famous speaker, very famous darshan, and the shul was packed. Packed. Noshim, Taf. Everybody was listening. They didn't have microphones in those days. They didn't have videos, but everybody was trying to listen. They hear what he had to say. And he's waiting. He put the talus on, and he's waiting. He's looking around. And no one knows what he's waiting for. Suddenly, he sees the door opens up, and who's standing by the door? The Moishe. The Moishe Einale. And the Moishe Einale is getting there, and the ganze Olam gasps. Oh no, like, oh gosh, one guy's coming, my shots is going to be Moishe, the ganze Olam, the ganze Shtun. The Maggid saw him, went running to him, grabbed his hand, and he pulled him all the way up front. Put him on Mizrach front. Now he knows he can't get out fast. Put him up front, right there, put him right there. Put his towels over his head, gave a kish to Berachis, and he started to speak. And he started to say, Kol Yisroel yesh lehem chelek le'elam. Hashem wants to be made to Medal Yidin. Kodesh Baruch Hu put people in this world. It should be Nen and Miziv Shchinosai. He wants them to have Elam Haba. The Gerste Idu and the Gerste Simcha, the Gerste Tainu. And he spoke for a short sight. How long about was is Elam Haba? Was Elam Haba? And then he turns around and he says, Mishnah says, Kol Yisroel yesh lehem chelek. He said, you know what Kol Yisroel means? Even that guy. Even that guy right there. That Moishe. She said, Toma was to fragen, if in Taiba you can ask me, how does it not Moshe have Elam? Yeah, no, the guy has no mitzvah, no Maisim Taiba, but they're only Maisim Roim. I'll tell you, I have Elam. I have Maisim Taiba. Let me tell you what I have. He started making a cheshbon. How many Chevra Tilims he started? How many Chevra Mishnayos he's founded? How many hospitals he started? How many Bikur Cholims he started? How many Chevra Shas he started? He started making a cheshbon. So what's that to him? He said, I'm being makne my ganze Olam Haba to this place. He said, with the Dayarim in the Shtad, called the Dayarim up, to make a star, I, Kelma Maggid of Kelm, giving away all my Olam Haba to this place. He wrote the star, they had Aiden assigned it on the spot, he told this place, no, come get it, you have to cut the star. Without writing a star doesn't help you, have to cut the star. And to the surprise of everybody, the guy got up, and he took the star. Now the Kelma Maggid took the Amen again, the stand again. He said, Rabbi say, yes, I'm learning the second part of the Mishnah. The Eilu she'ein lehem chelek le'elam haba. And he started to speak about people who lose their chelek le'elam haba. And what's involved in losing. And he started to talk about mamish, how the gefährlich mamish it is. And he went his way. Left the city, and on. A couple of years later, he comes back to the SHLTA. And he asks him, what's happening in the SHLTA? What's tut sich in the SHLTA? What's going? He said, what happened to Moishe? Moishe. Today the guy that called me Yisroel Tzadik. Tzadik. So what happened? He said, a couple of years ago, a Maggid came, did this kind of whole talent show. He pulled off the job. And from that time on, the guy does not leave the base medrash. He stays in the shul, and he's to avoidance Hashem. He learns and he davens. Nashim tzidkanis bring him food. The guy Parsha became a tzaddik. People go to the Brog already. He says, "I'm talking." Okay, so they called the Kelman came to the thing. So the guy sitting in the taka. And then he gets up and he speaks and he says, the Gemara in Yuma says, Mishima says that a person in a chet, in other chaveroi, you don't have Rosh Yom Kippur could come out, so you have no kapara until you have to mefayis the guy, you have to ask guy mechila, and you don't have mechila. And he started to turn around, and he spoke about how terrible it is. And then he turned around to this guy, Yosef the Moisir goes, he was not tzaddik. All your chatoyim have been on the chaver. You have a stake in the base of Kvarza. You mitzayir mishpachis. You put the fright. You matal evi yisayim of everybody over here. Your mom's a roshim of rushim neves mechila. The guy started to cry. Mamish like all this business. You have to go. You have to have some mechila for everybody. So I used to ganze SHLTA this here. So we're going to now enable you to ask mechila right here. You call the guy up, and he said, Chatasi, he said, after me, Chatasi, Lekei Yisroel, and the whole HaTeishavim of this city, and this and that, and told him this is, the guy did it, and everybody said, Mochalach, 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 and the guy, now he said, yes, but it's Yosef the Tzaddik. Now you're not, from height down, you're not Yosef the Moisir. You see, as Ahmed Zag, you can have a person who's a Rosh and Rosh. It wasn't a joke. The Kelma Maggid used to say, I don't know if I have an Elam Haba after that story, but I know I'm getting Elam Haba for giving away my Elam Haba. For saving this year, I'm definitely getting some Elam Haba. But they're very. But the person has to know that it wasn't a joke. He was saying, I feel a Rosh like you. Kadosh Baruch was a Chanam Arbel Islayach. There's a Chemel Gedoyel V'Yiseir Chamal Toleinu. There's a Mishkan Haders. And when you read this Parsha in the Torah every week, every year, and you said, Eila Pekudei Mishkan, Mishkan Haders, it's Shayach, the Baruch was V'Yitel. But you know what you have to do? You have to be sincere. You can't take advantage of Kadosh Baruch. You can't play with a Kadosh Baruch. You have to be sincere that I want to change. That fellow who I told you about, that I was talking to, told me he did all these chatoyim, which smoke on Shabbos, with Kippur, with Chametz, with Pesach. He did tshuva. Today he's ready. He's be'emish ish noy, the fine mensch, a good mensch. I was once talking to him a few years later, and he was telling me about some hardships that he was going through in his life. And I said, no, how are you handling it? So he said, listen, this is what he told me, I remember he made a big ratio. He said, mit alo der Rebbeinu Shalom chasodim, l'maisa, I still have a cheshbon. I have a cheshbon, you know? It's cooked peppers. He said, he tells me, I'm chayiv did something. I got to settle up on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, it's garnished. Klapi, what he's doing to me, it's nothing compared to what I did to him. And he was able to start a family and start a life, a whole new life. And he was able to that was Jewish life. That's what a person has to know. That there are people who've done tremendous chatoy. That was tremendous chatoy. And some people have made mistakes, she'ein yachal iskay. The Gemara says certain mistakes you make, you can't fix up. When I asked my grandfather about this, he said, no. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has his ways. Once had a guy who married a shiksa, he had 3 kids. So I asked my grandfather, I should waste my time. Again, the guy make good tshuva. He says, sure. Hashem has his ways. If a person's zeicha, Hashem has his ways. I once had a guy, a bacher from Yisroel, that I met him in Ungers. I was in Ungers one night, after the Koil night, and I was in Ungers, and the guy walks in and he asks the owner of the store, is it all right if I sleep in the parking lot? He looked like an Engel guy to me. He spoke a little accent. So I said to the guy, Shalom. what's the accent from? He said, I'm Israeli accent. I said, why would you want to sleep in the thing? Why don't you come sleep in my house? He said, everything you say there? And I got to know the guy, became very close to him. And this guy came to him from Yisroel. Never fell in with a shiksa. And he started to get interested in Yiddishkeit. And one night, she threw him out. Even though he was putting her through school, he was working like a sus. He was a very nice guy, really nice guy. In Yisroel, he worked in bitachon, security. He was a fine mensch. And this guy, and then I got to know him better and better and better. And the guy moved here, Mungim Light, and came very close to him. Started to, in his spare time, to learn yeshiva. He learned that he Shteig developed. And one day, the shiksa calls him up, and she tells him that I'm pregnant. And he came and told me. I said, oh no. So I told him, listen, forget about it. It's a mistake, you can move on. He said, no, I can't do that. He said, it's my kid. I brought it to this world, and that kid's not going to suffer. I'm responsible for that kid. He said, the first kid, it was bad enough that she had a kid whose father turned his back on him, and I became his father. I became very nice to that kid. And he had belief now in mankind again. And then I walked out on him. And now, my own kid, I'm not going to. So okay, I'll tell you what. We'll deal with that dialect service. But right now, let us go forward with Yiddishkeit. When you have the kid, we'll take care of it. Right now, it's in the shiksa's stomach. Right now, there's nothing. You don't have to even kissy. And right now, he's not going to feel any loss of paternal, relationship. And then the guy went on. He makes work every day, mamish. He lived over here. He moved here, and one day he called me up. He said, "What should I do?" I said, "What happened?" I said, "I was at work, and the boss calls me in. He said, go to the hospital right now. Somebody called you just now. She said you're the father of the kid, and she has an emergency. She needs you to go. Call me up." I said, "Don't go." I said, "Your responsibility is when you have the kid. Don't go back to the shiksa. I'm telling you, it's always trying to rope you in. Don't go back there." And he went to his car and he cried for hours. The guy didn't go. The next day he came to me and he said, the kid died. I said, Hoidu la Hashem ki toiv, ki la oilam chastak. Yoyma no Yisroel ki la oilam chastak. Yoyma no yirei Hashem ki la oilam chastak. And you realize what HaKadosh Baruch Hu just did? He saved your life. You would have come back there. You would have raised that kid. You would have been in Gehenna in jail living for that dog. You made a mistake when you had seichel like a cat. I said you had seichel like a cat, and you fell after this dog who used you, abused you, didn't give you anything, just Amish took advantage of you. And then you almost made a mistake in the lifetime, and then you came to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for you. So a person has to know, Mishkan HaEinus. The Lamed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mevatel, the Ma'aseh Egel, Shari Hishra Shchinasi L'nei.